Welcome to episode 461 of the AMPM podcast. You know, everybody always wants to be chasing the sexy things, the launching a new product, the PPC, the getting the TikTok creator to make something go viral, but the fundamentals are what often are the most important and most overlooked and the last to deal with, and they can cost you dearly. And you'll see that in my discussion today with Daren Garcia from Vorys. We're going to be talking about everybody's favorite topic, IP protection and counterfeits and knockoffs and what you can do and how you can protect yourself as a brand. So Vorys has been doing this for a long time, big, huge law firm out of Ohio. I think you'll get some good ideas and some good insights into how the process works in this discussion with Mr. Daren Garcia. Enjoy.
Welcome to the AMPM podcast. Welcome to the AMPM podcast, where we explore opportunities in e-commerce.
We dream big and we discover what's working right now.
Plus, this is the podcast where money never sleeps, working around the clock in the AM and the PM.
Are you ready for today's episode?
I said, are you ready? Let's do this. Here's your host, Kevin King. Kevin King.
Counselor Garcia, how are you doing? Daren Garcia here on the AMPM podcast from Vorys. How are you, man?
Yeah, good. I'm good. Thanks for having me, Kevin. That's good stuff. All good here. So looking forward to it today.
Now, whenever I say I've got a lawyer on the podcast, some people are like, "Oh my God, what are we going to be talking about today?" I've got a few questions for this Mr. Lawyer guy. So hopefully we can provide some value today, and I don't have to give that disclaimer that I just play a lawyer on TV. This is not legal. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, we can get it from someone that's a little bit more in the trenches.
Let's do it.
So tell me a little bit about, you've been practicing law for a while, and you've been at Vorys, I think, for a while. What is Vorys, and tell me a little bit about your story.
Yeah, so Vorys is a relatively large international law firm. It's historic headquarters in the state of Ohio with offices throughout the states and then over in Europe. I've been here my whole career, so probably 23-ish years or so. And done various things at the firm, but we're here to talk today about e-control. We'll get into all of that, but that would be a specialized group within the Vorys firm.
Because there's like 300, 400 lawyers. I mean, you guys do everything from basic corporate law. I mean, it's across the gamut, right?
Oh yeah, no, it's a full service firm that does, probably the only thing that we don't do would be criminal and domestic issues and things like that. We probably touch most other things in some way or another.
Do you litigate? Is the firm litigate as well? Or okay.
Yeah. The firm's historic roots were in litigation. I came up as a litigator. A lot of people that do what we do in our group came up as litigators. So they sort of bring that mindset into the e-commerce space. So it's been a good sort of foundation for all this stuff that we're doing now.
Now you guys have been doing e-commerce. Did you all start getting into it when this whole Amazon third party kind of boom started happening around 2014, 2015, or were you doing it before then? Or?
Interestingly, I have a partner, Whitney Gibson, in Cincinnati. I sit in Columbus and I manage our London office, so I'm back and forth between the States and Europe quite a bit. But Whitney, at a very young age, had a practice centered around internet defamation. So think like the early days of Yelp and things like that, when those began to be a big deal and companies would get defamed or slandered or whatever on those platforms, and they started to have an impact. And so businesses would reach out, and he ended up getting a lot of the early work in that space, which really was some of the early days of integrating law and data tech, because you needed to be able to look out across the web, see what was being said, and then have a scalable way to address that. So fast forward a bit, and Amazon started to really catch fire, and branded manufacturers started to have to wrestle with the channel a bit more. Instead of maybe 3, 4, 5% of revenue, all of a sudden it's 8, 9, 10, and executives start to take notice. So they start trying to manage it a bit, and so brands started reaching out saying, "Hey, I get that people may say things about us online, but what I'm most concerned about are these people selling our stuff on marketplaces like Amazon and disrupting us." So that's really how we how we got into that. He and a couple other guys down in Cincinnati went into the Batcave and came up with some of the early strategies and really frameworks that really we still use today on this stuff. And then I teamed up with them, just sort of contemporaries of mine in the firm. I teamed up with them, after they were doing it for maybe a few months or a year or so. So it was really early days still. And then we've just kind of gone from there. I came up doing a lot of work in the retail space. So as retail brands started coming up and caring about things like MAP and how much they're selling and all of that, he said, hey, you know a lot about retail. Would you come with me to go talk to this brand? And in case they want to talk about retail stuff. And so I said, sure. And that's how we kind of teamed up on this.
So how big is the team that focuses on e-commerce?
Yeah,
now?
I mean, it's big now. I mean, it's probably around 100 people. That's all multidisciplinary. You have lawyers, investigators, brand protection people, data analysts, data scientists, software developers. I mean, within the collective group of Vorys e-control, and then the firm's ancillary business that we own called Precision e-control that runs the data and tech platforms, there's probably at least 100 of us doing it full time.
Now, are you guys doing across the globe, or is it just like I saw on your website, there's certain states that you guys are, where you have offices? I mean, because I know you can't, there's certain rules where you can practice and do stuff in certain states, or you can only litigate, or you can only enforce, you can threaten anywhere, but you can only enforce in certain states. So is it across the globe or just more localized?
No, we do work globally, which has been amazing. But the firm's physical offices around the U.S. are in various, cities. And certainly if you want to turn up to court or actually, practice law in a particular jurisdiction, you have to be licensed there. But, we have a national practice in the U.S. in this space. And then, as you point out, an international one, most of the work internationally being Canada, Europe, Australia, China, Korea. I'm sure I'm missing a couple of others, but those would be some of the bigger markets internationally.
Now, there's
all the international stuff for us.
Now, you mentioned like the guy that Whitney, I think you said his name was, that started up kind of with Etsy and Yelp and some of those guys in the early days. Isn't there something that there's some sort of law in the U.S. where the marketplaces are kind of immune? Just like on Facebook, they're not really liable for if someone slanders you or does something. They are responsible to take it down if they have a court order and things like that. But they're kind of like they're like, we're just the middleman. We're not involved here. And there's some sort of law or rule around that.
Yes. The platforms have largely, so you can put Amazon in there, Walmart Marketplace, eBay, on down the line. They've taken the position that they are just, as you say, open platforms that provide a place for people to buy and sell products. They may also, in the case of like an Amazon or Walmart, be selling the product there themselves in kind of a first party scenario. But yeah, they've taken the position that we just facilitate the transactions. If there's issues going on that the brand is upset about, the brand has its recourse, but it's not really with us. We're just the platform. It's with respect to the person out there doing whatever it is the brand doesn't want to be done.
How does that differ from the law? I mean, just that if I go into a grocery store and they just recently mopped the floor and I slip and fall and break my arm, I can sue the grocery store. How come I can't do that like in a marketplace, like go after Amazon for looking the other way, or creating an environment where they don't enforce certain things? Yeah,
I mean, so, obviously there's a lot of nuance, all that. And to everybody listening, this isn't legal advice. Check with your lawyers. But it really comes down to, in your example, like the grocery store would have control over the physical premises. They're inviting people onto the platform and, they're the ones that have the control over the floor and all of that. Like a marketplace, an online marketplace's position would be like, look, we just provide the platform. The resellers are the one controlling whether the product that they have is authorized or unauthorized, whether it's counterfeit or real, those sorts of things. And so, that would be the difference there.
Well, Amazon typically, from a legal point of view, whether that's collecting sales tax or whether that's enforcing liability and insurance rules and all kinds of stuff, usually like they don't really act like they should until they're forced to, usually. by legal or action, or something's going to happen in Congress, or there's a big, huge story that comes out that, by one of the reputable, Wall Street Journal or someone like that, where credibility, and then they take a little bit of action, but then I just remember, like with the sales tax thing, they just like, oh, that's not us. And then finally it came around like, okay, that is us. And it's kind of the same when it comes to IP and other things too, isn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, so in our experience, I'll say this. I mean, obviously everybody wants the Amazons of the world, or wherever you are in the world, the Alibaba Group, whatever, to be more proactive around infringements and counterfeit and safety, and is something being sold here that, has ingredients that aren't legal in the US or in Europe or vice versa. And, I guess what we would say is that they do a pretty good job at providing tools for things that are like really true, like hardcore IP infringement. So counterfeiting, even down to like stolen product and thing, the counterfeit crimes unit and whatnot. And that's all fine. That, there's different layers to that type of stuff. I mean, you could sit there and press the buttons and do takedowns. You can escalate things to the legal department there and get them to take notice if it's a significant issue. I mean, you start to see brands get into gating and things like that if they have massive counterfeit issues, and Amazon believes that, it's an Amazon in the consumer's interest that there be heightened protections. But, where they don't get involved in our world would be around things like unauthorized sale from the brand's perspective of legitimate product, respecting MAP policies, distribution, go-to-markets, things like that. That's where, I think the brand's desires collide with Amazon's or whatever the marketplace is. But let's just say Amazon, short for marketplace today. Their posture that, look, we're just that open platform. That's where things really get disrupted most often.
I see a lot of sellers in the forums and stuff. I've been doing this for a long time. They'll say, oh, I got a hijacker on my listing. Or they'll do one of these promotions, these search find buys, where they send out a free product in exchange for hoping to get some reviews. They couch it under different things, but the ultimate goal is to get rank and reviews. And then the person that got this free product really doesn't care for this product, doesn't want the product, probably never even opened and used it, just wrote a review, and now they're selling it on their listing. And they think that's counterfeiting or hijacking, and it's really not, because it's something called the first sale doctrine in the U.S. Can you explain what that is and how it's different in the U.S. versus like in your London office? There's different rules. Can you explain how what that is?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably, safe for those listening to understand generally, really in every market around the world, that it's fine to buy and resell product. Okay. We call it the first sale doctrine in the US. and other countries of the world, it's maybe called exhaustion doctrine, or the exhaustion principle, or things like that. And what that means is that once a manufacturer or a brand makes something and sells it the first time, so you make a widget, you sell it to a distributor, that distributor then goes and resells it down the chain. Once you sell it that first time to the distributor, it can be bought and resold. So somebody could say, I have a Kevin brand widget, and that's what I'm reselling. And that's okay. They're allowed to use your, information, your brand and things to resell. That's really what that means. And that's really why, if you really think about it, things like marketplaces can exist in the first place is because of that rule. Otherwise, people couldn't just take it and resell it. And so that's really what brands are grappling with every day, is how do we, in the face of that rule, manage to control our sales on a platform like it.
Now, I can have an agreement with a distributor, right? That says if I do this in advance of actually shipping them or agreeing to sell them product, that basically restricts them from, like, you're not allowed to sell this on Amazon. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't sell it to somebody who then turns around and does it, and it still makes its way there through the back door, in essence. But I can do things like that to protect myself if I want to, right?
Yeah, 100%. And that strategy, whether it's called, authorized reselling agreements, or in Europe, something like that would be called like a selective distribution. That's been around for decades. And so you'd see, it's why you don't see like luxury goods in Target or Walmart or, things like that, or why certain brands like high-end electronics and things like that, even though they may sell through a distributor, they have that very locked down. I mean, those companies have made the decision a long time ago that, those controlled sales and their long-term brand equity and all of that is more important than any sort of short-term sale. Now, that reality is colliding today with more mass distributed brands that have never had those controls in place on the front end. And so what they're trying to do is to understand how can we, in a logistically feasible way, I can't go get signed, agreements with everybody. How do we, in a feasible way, maintain control over that space? So you see them issuing policies and things like that a lot.
So when it comes to some of the liability and some of what's going on with both, I mean, I there was a story back in I think May about a lot of counterfeit supplements being on Amazon, and you don't know exactly what you're getting, and some people are saying this is got these ingredients and it really doesn't, or doesn't have the percentage. That's a big issue. And then another issue is just, I don't know if you guys deal with this as well, but it's not really IP, but the product liability. There's another issue in June. It was in the New York Post in early June, where there's a company selling a device and people are getting hurt left and right. They're using it to like prop up their cars, like one of these jacks, you're going to work under your car to prop up your car. And it turns out that I think the New York Post did something. It was like 1,400 Better Business Bureau complaints against this company, and they're selling like crazy on Amazon. So what's the proper way that those things can be addressed from a legal point of view, no matter which side you're on? Because that's just dangerous, and that hurts everybody, because those sets precedents and hurts everybody down the chain.
Yeah. I mean, it's a it's not an uncomplicated issue. I mean, I guess I would say that if you're a brand, whether you're selling car jacks or supplements or whatever, you're running into the reality of this just being, as we've been talking about, an open platform. And so it really is your move as a brand to step in and control that. I mean, the marketplaces typically aren't going to do it for you, or not to do it in a way that you would potentially be happy with. And so what you'll see them do is sort of multifaceted. First and foremost, you have to have the data. So you've got to look out and be able to see everybody that's selling your stuff, either your ASIN or using your name in their listing or whatever. You got to be able to get your arms around all that. Then you have to say, okay, what's at issue? I mean, is it just an unauthorized sale? Or to your point, is it something where maybe it's potentially a counterfeit product or things like that? Now, there are certain indicators of a counterfeit product. Is the pricing super low? Is the seller based in China? Have I never heard of them? Is it hard to figure out where they have a physical presence in the US? There's all of these little data points that would indicate that there is an issue. Now, let's assume that there is. Okay. So you have your first tier things, which would be to go like on a brand registry or something like that and get it taken down. But the smart brands would also be doing a couple of things. They would be compiling a lot of information like, okay, look, I've done all I can. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing on brand registry, or if you have e-commerce specific ASINs, maybe you had them in transparency or whatever it is. But I'm still having these issues. I'm getting overrun. And, when those, we call them like a little dossier, can be assembled and provided to Amazon in a compelling way. Sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes they'll step in and put a few hurdles in place for people to list the product outside of the brand's authorized sellers. So that would be sort of now getting into the the realm of gating and the different sort of levels of gating that's out there. The thing around, the counterfeits and whatnot is you also have to be very careful as a brand that you're not just calling things counterfeit that you don't know for sure that they are, because that can backfire as well. You see a lot of lawyers out there sort of looking for brands making those mistakes so they can sue, right?
So let's explain what gating is to those listening. Some people may not know what that is. There's brand protection through brand registry, which is limited in scope. But then the next level up at Amazon, you used to be able to just request this back 7-8 years ago, and then it got to where you had to know the right lawyer at Amazon and send the right letter on legal letterhead, and they would gate you. Now it's a whole different animal. It's much more difficult to get gated. But can you explain what gating actually is for those listening?
Yeah, in lay terms, and just everybody remember, I'm just a lawyer. I'm not I'm not an e-com. I'm not a VP of e-com at some brand. But here's sort of the lay definition of brand gating as I think about it. It would be Amazon itself implementing a blockade to say, look, we are not going to allow products to be listed unless they are from like a single seller, whether that's Amazon 1P itself or the brand itself or whatever. So other third parties can't list a particular product. Now you'll see it more widespread in like a premium beauty and things like that. But outside of that space, it's relatively rare. So everybody, it's all over the place on like a LinkedIn and things like that, talking about Nike coming back to Amazon. Well, Nike was able to, effectively be gated, and they had the brand power to do that. But there's, the Nikes of the world are few and far between.
Yeah, Nike was able to get like 268 sellers or something like that off as well when they came back in, or maybe it's more than that by now. But they were able to get a bunch of them off. But so basically, so gating means you got to have permission from the brand to actually list it on Amazon in writing. They got to send a special document, and then you're allowed to, as a seller, to list it. It usually goes under their storefront. It doesn't go under your storefront, but you're allowed to be a third party seller. And some big brands, like Body Glove, I've done that in the past with Body Glove. They allowed that, but others like Nike and Apple and stuff are very particular on who they're going to let do that.
They are, and I mean, the gating is kind of like the big unicorn in the sky out there. Everybody sort of would, I want to get gated like Nike or Apple or whatever. And it's kind of like, look, it's just not going to happen for the average brand. It's just contrary to Amazon's, real ethos about the whole thing.
Yeah, everybody wants that monopoly, so I don't have to compete against anybody on the buy box, and I can control it. But so when usually one of the first steps that happens is a cease and desist letter, and sometimes this comes from a lawyer. Sometimes it's a ChatGPT generated one by a seller trying to scare somebody.
Yeah.
Can you explain what a cease and desist letter is and what the purpose is? And is that just a U.S. thing, or does that apply like in Europe and stuff too?
Well, I mean, I think the way to think about a cease and desist is simply just a letter from the brand or from, the brand's lawyers saying, hey, we know you're selling our product, and for these reasons, we need you to stop, to cease and desist what you're doing. Our view of all of that would be that, for brands to be sending those letters, they have to have the legal basis to be able to send them. There's a whole world out there of people that advertise, I'll get rid of X% of your marketplace sellers, or, we have the ability to enforce against Amazon sellers or whatnot. And if your brand is sitting there, that's all great, but you have to keep in mind that unless you have a very particular foundation, it's fine to buy and sell your stuff. And so the first thing that a brand needs to do before you even get into the cease and desist world is to build that legal foundation wherever you are in the world. I mean, it could be the US, could be Europe, could be Canada, Australia, wherever, to enable you to even have a basis to go out and send those. But then those letters are usually sent to resellers, and then they have a choice. Do we comply or do we not? And then the brand's next move will depend on, as all ties back to that foundation that they have.
So some people use cease and desist almost like a big cannon, and they put all kinds of demands in there. Like, I need copies of your reports, and I need copies of this, and you must turn over all your inventory by this XY date, or else I'm doing XYZ. Right. And a lot of those are some of those are serious, but some of those are just threats to scare the little guy sitting in his underwear in his house that's selling your product on his computer. So when, as a seller, if I get a cease and desist letter, I mean, I know it's up to me what I do, like you just said, but to what level should I pay attention to that? Should I run out and get an attorney? Should I personally answer it myself, or should I just ignore it and see if they send a second one and then get serious? Or what as a seller, from the seller's point of view, what would you recommend one of your clients, if they got one of those, to do?
Well, yeah, I mean, we represent the brands, not really the sellers. But I think just as a general matter, I remember when I was in law school, one of the professors said, "Look, there's a rule in the law that says open your mail, stupid." Which is, what they were really saying is you can't just ignore things like that. Things typically get worse if they're ignored. And so if you're a seller out there and you do get one of those letters, I think it's probably prudent for you to take it to your lawyer or to reach out to the brand yourself if you don't have one and just say, "Hey, what's going on? I got this letter. Why are you sending it to me?" And then you're likely to hear from the brand, "Well, you're not authorized, et cetera." And then, who's right and who's wrong in that scenario often ties back again. I know I sort of keep repeating this, but does the brand have a legal foundation that would allow them to still enforce against a seller, even with that first sale doctrine being sort of, the starting point?
Now, back at the turn of the decade, around 2018, 2019, in the Amazon space, I've been selling third party since 2015 on Amazon since 2001. Vorys had a reputation in some circles as being a bully, and there's a lot of stuff of going out there and like getting all these cease and desist letters and all kinds of stuff on the forum, like they're just bullying, they're just this and that, and then other people are like, no, that's just good lawyer work, that's just good, good legal work there. It's just like I don't know, a collection agency. There's some collection agencies that call you and say, "Hey, you want to settle your credit card debt?" And then there's other ones that are digging around and using the law to the fullest extent, and maybe calling your neighbor and saying, "Do you know Kevin?" Or going to getting liens or whatever it may be. And it's just good work. What do you remember what was going on back then that was causing? So I think you guys were doing a lot of proactive work on behalf of your clients, and it was, I think it was good legal work. But a lot of people, there's lawyers that popped up and said, even an industry that popped up and said, "Hey, we'll help you fight Vorys." Don't let them bully you. We actually know how to do this kind of stuff. And so what was going on back then? And what would you say to that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that during that time, and really, the activity has only increased year over year since then. But I think around that time, a lot of branded manufacturers, wasn't really just first movers anymore. It was a lot of just mainstream brands that everybody's heard of, decided that they needed to proactively assert more control over the channel. So you saw like a lot more widespread enforcement. You saw legal decisions come down that said that brands indeed do have the ability to control this, and that there are reasons why. I mean, I guess what I would say is, and again, I respect the different views of things and people's different positions, but from the brand standpoint, they've spent an incredible amount of time and money bringing products to market, and they have certain revenue expectations for those products, certain go-to-market strategies. They want to sell through people that are, invested in the distribution and the growth of the brand. And so they want to have, some ability to have an appropriate return on all of the investments that they've made, all within the bounds of what's legal. And so that's, really where we came up in the space, is we said, look, we're just going to do this the right way within the bounds of the law. We don't do black hat. We don't do gray hat and things like that. But I think around the time period that you're referencing, it went from, dozens of brands doing this to hundreds of brands doing this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah.
But isn't it a lot of times pop a mole? Like that game Pop a Mole, because I know a brand that I have another podcast called The Marketing Misfits, and we had a lady on that's done very well with a light. She was a eyelash technician, and she had developed her own light to light up the face, because the lighting had shadows and stuff, and she built this arc light. And then when COVID hit, she had to shut down her salon, and she's like, "What do I do?" And she decided to manufacture this light and put it out there, and it's like a $500 light, and now it's taken off, and tattoo guys are using it, and it's just taken off. But she's had tons of knockoffs. I think she said 137 or something Chinese cheap knockoffs.
Yeah.
She makes hers in the U.S. and she says she has a full-time lawyer just dealing with just knocking them down. They'll get them taken off, and then another one pops up, and then another one pops up. So, is it in some cases where, I mean, I liken marketplaces to the old mafia days of The Sopranos. You know, there's a lot of money in the garbage misses, so the bad comes in. So it seems like sometimes people just don't care. And so, is it a constant battle? And some of these big firms are just, all right, we're 3% of sales are devoted to IP protection or something.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is a constant battle. Yeah, I mean, the brands that are out on the front foot on this stuff, they don't think about it as a project. They think about it more of like an ongoing program that's always in the background. Now, you mentioned knockoffs. Now we've covered a lot of different types of disruption. You have counterfeits, you have knockoffs, you have unauthorized sales, you have map violations if you're in the US or like Canada where you can do those types of things. Knockoffs, for example, are difficult. And I think that maybe brands do sort of feel that whack-a-mole type feeling because, that really comes down to, does the brand have patents, design patents and things like that on the specific product itself? Because the knockoffs are under a different UPC, different ASIN and things like that. They're just diluting sales of the product. So it's not, so much on that specific ASIN. Somebody saying, I'm selling this particular light that's made in the US, like a counterfeiter. It's just, we're copycatting that product and we're hoping that
she has patents and IP on it. That's one of the ways she's actually able to enforce.
Yeah.
But it's it's a process and it costs money and time.
100%. I mean, it's just a, obviously, I mean, this is how we earn a living, but if you think about it, everybody sort of understands supply chain control and all of that, but as the e-commerce world has gotten where it is and the omni-channel kind of ecosystem is the way it is, meaning that everybody's interconnected. What happens on Walmart impacts Amazon, vice versa. I mean, on Target, impacts Amazon. What happens brick and mortar impacts what's happening on a marketplace like Amazon. The brands need to think about it in terms of revenue disruption, because your revenue is going to be disrupted multiple ways any given day. And you've got to be able to surface that to say, is this meaningful, financially, and B, if so, what is it that's actually happening to, your contact there that had the lamp? That's a knockoff issue. Then there's the counterfeiting on the fake supplements we were talking about. Then there's unauthorized sales. I mean, all of those are different paths that you need to take.
Yeah, what she's doing actually is she's created her own knockoff. So hers is all made in the U.S. out of metal, and a lot of these cheaper ones are like $70 or something, and they're made out of plastic, and they're not very good. So she created her own knockoff to compete at that price point. And then when they buy that, she tells them, "Hey, this is just she has a little story in there, and she says, if you want the real one, I'll knock $100 off. So I'll give you $79. Whatever you pay for this plus $20 off, and here's how you get the real one." And it's a pretty effective strategy. Yeah. But on the IP side, I know I had someone on the podcast a month or two ago that helps with a little bit of IP stuff, and he said they had a case where a woman developed this charging thing, plugs into the wall, and it somehow has some sort of patented technology of the way it lets you plug in different outlets or additional outlets. It's like an extender and a surge protector kind of thing. And so he said that she put it up on Amazon and crushed it. But as soon as she put it up, it wasn't a difficult product to make. There's tons of knockoffs, violating her IP. And he said eventually, after about 2 or 3 months, those guys actually got her shut down. And she was the owner and the brand. And he's like, this is just a freaking mess. I mean, Amazon's become so big, and then I just saw, just had in my newsletter, $1 Billion Sellers, a story where they've just deleted like 50 million products off of the website. 50 million.
Yeah,
these are ones that have been sitting on there for 2 or 3 years and haven't made a sale. But just the scope, there's something like 5 to 7 million, I think is what Helium 10 says, active products that are actually making a regular sale here and there. That's a lot of stuff to like babysit and keep on. So it's just so big. It just becomes, you hear cases of really good stories and things happen really quick. And then you have those that are fighting this stuff for like 3 years.
Oh yeah.
Do you see that as well?
I do 100%. I mean, and I think that it just doesn't surprise or, shock me in any way at all, because, they provide the tools that they provide. They're good to a point, but beyond that, there's just a lot of self-help that a manufacturer, whoever's selling the product that cares about the sales is going to need to do. And you're just bumping into this, widest selection, lowest price, open platform. Those are the pillars. And, things that sit outside of that just aren't the core focus from my experience of the company.
What about, I think, there's all this big tariff talk with what Trump has been doing earlier this year, and, saying we need to get balance and everything. There's a lot of good and some, like, I don't know about that parts of it, but one of the things that's not discussed really that I think should be discussed is the IP protection. I know Trump brought it up. You guys just steal our stuff, and which is true a lot. But any Chinese seller can come and sell in the United States super easily. If I want to sell on TikTok Shop, I have to have a registered person in the United States with their driver's license or their ID, and prove that they're a U.S. citizen, and that way there's a responsible person in the U.S. Right. The same for Amazon Japan. Japan has a rule that you have to have a responsible person in Japan, that if your product is faulty or whatever that you're importing, that they can go after that's local. We don't have that here. So when there's a company or person violates IP and you guys are going out and find them, you're like, oh my gosh, this is based in Shenzhen. There's no U.S. You can't. Your investigators. You said you got a bunch of investigators. Your investigators can't find any trace of any U.S. based stuff. What do you do, or what can you do to help mitigate that problem? Because there's nobody that's going to be liable other than just shut their account and get their account shut down.
Well, there's that. I mean, there's a whole movement around that. What you just talked about. I mean, you'll see brands going up, filing suits in court, usually under like an injunctive type approach. So forcing the courts to make quick decisions rather than some prolonged, litigation process. Now, the goal in those would be to get the account shut down, and then, I think more importantly, to be able to seize the funds in the accounts to cover the damage. I mean, getting an account shut down is fine, but that's whackable. It just pops up under a different name of your different account the next day. But actually getting to those funds and getting those seized by the court orders is probably the best bet. I mean, I think
that hurts them the most. When they can't pull out their $100,000 or whatever, they're like,
I'll go sell something else. Yeah, I mean, that's really what you're going for. I mean, I think if these things are happening to you, around the Chinese kind of counterfeiters and things like that, you have three, if I have this right in my head, counting them up in my head, three options. Number one, like we just said, pop the seller in court. It's not super, you have to pay to be able to do that as a brand. So I don't want to act like, oh, that's just, like snapping your fingers. It's not, but that can be the quickest way to leverage the U.S. legal system to punish those sellers in a way that.
How quick can that be done? An injunction? I typically, I know it's probably dependent on the court and stuff, but what's just like a rule of thumb you would tell a client, like, we can probably have an injunction in a month, in 2 weeks, in 3 months?
Yes, there would be a couple of phases. So the first is often what's called everybody hears the word TRO, or temporary restraining order. So that you kind of go into court on an emergency basis and you say, hey, look, this is happening to me. I need relief today or tomorrow. That's a matter of days, 1, 2, 3 days before you get somebody to rule on an interim basis on that. So they would come in, they would say, hey, the judge would say, hey, yeah, it looks like you have a valid point here. I'm going to go ahead and give you a temporary restraining order take that to Amazon and say, okay, this listing, we got to pause it here while the court sorts this out. Then the court would say, okay, now we're going to go to what's called a preliminary injunction. That might be 2 weeks, 3 weeks after the TRO hearing. And that's where there's a more fulsome discussion of the issue. The other side will often, show up if they're going to show up, and you kind of have it out like a little mini battle, little mini trial. And coming out of that, you get a more permanent order then that you could take to like an Amazon and have the, attack the funds or whatever it is that you're about to do. And so all that to say, I guess, in a long wind up way to say that you could probably be through that process in 2 to 4 weeks.
Now you said there's 3 things, so that's one of the ways is to go that quick court order type of stuff. What are the other couple?
One. The other would be to involve the marketplace. Now that's going to take, again, none of these. I don't want to act like any of these are like silver bullets or like light switches, but it'll be able to show in a compelling way the repeat pattern of infringement that is actually damaging to Amazon's reputation or to consumer safety. I think would be the 2 things that are most, in our experience, most compelling to Amazon to urge them to implement some type of like gating or other protections that we've talked about. The third, and this is not going to be, super attractive to a lot other than, probably bigger brands with bigger budgets and things, would be to take the show to China and figure out where the stuff's being made there and crack down on it there. Now, if people go to prison for that there, it's just most don't go through the hoops of going after it in China.
Yeah, that's a whole nother legal system, and
That's
a whole nother world, and there's lots of rules. You got to do it in the district where the factory is, and there's all this stuff, and China has different rules on trademarks where you can act. I had this happen to a seller that I know. They were in like 4 years ago in the middle of closing to Thrasio. Selling their business for $3 or $4 million, and the day the money was supposed to be wired and the deal closed, their listing went down, and completely went down. And they're like, "What the heck?" And it turns out that someone had filed a complaint. A competitor had colluded with the factory in China. They all made their products at the same factory. Colluded with the factory and actually got a trademark or something in China to actually block the export of this, and then used that, sent that into Amazon, and Amazon just said, okay, sure. Well, took it down, and they were able to solve the problem, and the deal ended up going through, but it was hell for the seller for a while until they got that sorted out. But there's all kinds of little loopholes and ways that with enough money involved, people will do a lot of crazy things.
Very entrepreneurial people over there in China. I mean, for all the sellers and brands, that are in your audience here, China has, and some other countries do too, but China has a first to file trademark system, meaning the first one that can make their way to the agency and say, I want to register mark X, is the one that's going to get it. In the US, it would be sort of first to use and things like that. And so even if you haven't registered it officially, you can show that you're truly the one that ought to have it. But China, it's a race. And so, they'll see products that are gaining velocity and things like that, and they'll just go and say, okay, are they registered here? If not, boom, register it. And now you're in a fight like you just mentioned.
Yeah. And they can block, there's certain ways that they can actually block the export of that under certain circumstances as well. So that can just cause all kinds of problems. All kinds of
chaos. It's super cheap to get a trademark. Super cheap is relative, I guess, but it's not hard or particularly expensive to get your trademarks in China. So if you have any type of, certainly global business, or you have, a product that, you've mentioned a few here that are taking off on like an Amazon from a, velocity standpoint, I would just go ahead and do it. It's not, it's a relatively easy box to check if you do it on the front.
Now, do you guys help for brands enforce not just when we talked about counterfeiting and duplicates and all these different things, but what about them just using the marks? So I'm an iPhone case guy, let's say, seller, and I'm selling iPhone cases, and if I think the way it's set up on Amazon, if I say iPhone iPhone case XRT32XY, whatever, that's in my title, I can actually get shut down because it appears that that's an iPhone case by the way I've worded the title, versus if I say it's an XR whatever 32P pink case for an iPhone, I'm okay. Compatible with or something like that. Do you guys help enforce that kind of stuff for your brands as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, those are, I guess, what I would call more, that's kind of more check the box type stuff. That can all be done in like a brand registry and things like that. But yeah, I mean, you start running into what is, and it's beyond the scope of what we're getting into here, but what's kind of fair use of a mark and what isn't. So you see the compatible widths a lot, which, is allowed in certain instances, versus saying this is an iPhone case, blah, 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 which is confusing to people. The test really, it all of these things from a legal standpoint have their basis in some philosophy. And the one at issue here would be, the whole purpose of a trademark is to educate consumers, so consumers know what they're getting. And if you say, iPhone in the title, but you don't have an iPhone branded case, it's something else, that's confusing to people. So all of that is designed to protect consumer confusion. And, like the platforms will allow for the enforcement of that stuff just because it's relatively cut and dry.
And sometimes though, these big law firms, I mean, they got money and they got time and they got people on staff. Sometimes they're sitting around like, okay, instead of taking the afternoon off, go find something to do. It seems like sometimes, because I've had cases or in another business of mine, we dealt with, we had a website and it was like swimsuit models and stuff.
Yeah.
And one of these girls' name, her stage name, it wasn't her real name, but her stage name was Alexis Winston, ALEXUS, Winston. And that's a woman's name. And Toyota came after us for saying that we're violating their trademark because of a Lexus and Lexus, and this is damaging to their mark, and we're not having anything to do with cars. There's not even a picture of a car in any of the shots or whatever. But it was such a, I mean, it was so lawyered up letter. There's like, we could fight this, but we're going to spend, and probably win it, but we're going to spend 10, 15, 20, 30 grand dealing with this. And it's just easier to just tell or change your name on the website. So sometimes there's those kinds of things. And then I had another case back where we were using the word centerfold in Google. Someone, we were optimized back in the days where you could put, keywords like in your meta tags and stuff like that. And Google would actually recognize that and index you on it. This is early days. We had the word centerfold in there. So people typing in, like Playboy centerfold or something would find our website because we had models that were Playboy centerfolds. And they came after us for violation because the word centerfold is actually a trademark term of Playboy.
Nope. Okay.
So they came after. So do you see that happening on Amazon where people are, maybe they're doing comparisons? Let me compare my product to this big brand name product so that when someone types in, they get the juice, the Amazon associates those together. Yeah. And they're kind of leeching off the back and writing the brand equity and goodwill of those brands. And then in some cases they do very well. Is that something that is worth you guys fight on behalf of some of your clients as well? Yeah,
100%. I mean, we deal with that. I would say quite a bit. I mean, we would, and I mean, how we do stuff is one thing, but I think for the audience, the takeaway ought to be, you need to be able to understand where you're losing real money. Not, is there somebody out there that's using your name? Okay, that's annoying and potentially bad, but you've got to be able to quantify what the damage is or what the impact would be, because you made several points throughout the discussion. You got 5-7 million products there. It's a massive world. That's just on Amazon. Then you've got every other marketplace out there. So, seller, brand, whatever, you can't be flailing around reacting to everything. So the first thing I would say is you've got to get clear on what the impact is. So, if somebody's used it and it's an easy fix, I'm going to go on like a brand registry and take it down, fine. If it's going to be some more involved situation, then I would sit there and say, okay, really, how much revenue is flowing through that ACE? How disruptive is it? Do we think we could pull it back into the authorized one and whatnot? Because time and budgets are time and budgets, and you have to be able to stack those in a way that's going to be the best for the business overall.
Yeah, I do that just as an example for those listening. Is a lot of you know that I have the Freedom Ticket course, and I have a lot of content that I put out, BDSS content, and I sell that content. People will pay $1,000 to get the replays of some of the trainings and stuff that we do. And then inevitably somebody somewhere, usually in Eastern Europe, will take that content, they'll buy it. They'll buy it with a stolen credit card, but I don't know that for like 3 weeks until it comes back. And then they download it all or screen capture it all, and then they put it up on what's called a torrent, TORRENT site. And then they resell it to people for, instead of $1,000, it's $15-$30. It's straight up stealing. They're stealing my content and putting it up, and that's whack-a-mole. And then some of these servers are like in Russia or other places where it's difficult to actually get them taken down. And so I used to worry about that and like, oh my gosh, I'm losing so much money. How many people are buying this? And now I'm just like, you know what? Someone that's going to go to those sites is not my customer anyway. They're never going to spend $1,000. I can turn this around to a positive and tell the people that are on my providing the content to teach it. I was like, look, we're going to have about 300 people, 400 people pay the $1,000, and then we're going to have another 10,000 watch it. So you're getting a really good reach, and so you're getting your word out. So it's not worth fighting. So I think that's something that a lot of people, but it took me a while to realize that. I think your point is good about sellers need to focus on what's moving the needle and what's not, and don't worry about the little things.
Yeah. We always say impact over activity. And, I think just for your audience, there's brand protection on the one hand, and there's brand control. Okay. And if you look at the evolution of this space, you would say, okay, late 90s, early 2000s, internet, gaining steam, e-commerce gaining steam. And you start seeing people care about, oh, did my images get ripped off and get put off over here? Did somebody take my content and pirating it or whatever? And so that industry came up. It was really kind of the first, type in this space. But that industry depends on finding violations, serving them up to the brand and saying, hey, should we do something about this? So it's constantly trying to surface new things without so much of a lens on, is this commercially impactful? It's simply, do I have something I can do something about? So then you start seeing things like the map world and pricing world and things like that. And people saying, oh, I'll go monitor the web and see who's breaking your price. And I'll tell you, this is in the US, you can't do that in Europe or in other regions of the world. But that became a thing for a while. Now there's so much money flowing through these channels that brands are looking to say, not just, not how do I protect my IP, but how do I control this whole experience? Okay. Or if, you're an exclusive seller on a brand, for example, you'd be thinking that way too. So it's been a bit of an evolution. And you just start to see more and more. Yeah, I get that there's a technical violation there, but I've got to be able to focus my attention and time on the things that are actually going to make money at the end of the day.
How is AI affecting what you guys do?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big deal. Internally, we have a ton of initiatives around that. I mean, everybody, what's really exciting to us is that, I believe we probably have the broadest set of data and data points and things like that in this space. And so the ability to layer the AI on top of all of that and just move faster than any human can move at surfacing recommendations for particular sellers. What's all of our experience around a particular type of disruption? How do you do things in this region or that region? What's effective and what isn't across tens and tens of thousands of different actions? That's been very exciting to start to see that start to come to light. for us. So that's that. And then, we use it a lot to begin the process of doing things that would be more routine and rote that people would have to do. But I just, you sit there and you start to think about it. It's like almost like contemplating the universe. Like, where's all this going to go? How's it all going to happen? You just try to stay out on the front foot on the front edge of it and lean in, because I don't think anybody really knows.
No, it's an amazing time. Now you've got a service though that you deal with a lot of big brands, the Fortune 500s, and a lot of those guys are clients of your firm. But you also have something that can help the smaller guy, right? Don't you have a monitoring service of some sort, can you tell me a little bit about how that works?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're a brand or a seller that represents brands in an author, I mean, we deal in the authorized world, not so much gray market sellers and things like that. But I think what's most important is that you get on the right path. Now there are different sort of stages along that path. You've got everything from, I just want to get my arms around what's going on and see, do I know any of these people? Can I figure out where these problems are coming from? Do some self-help and things like that. You have some kind of volume enforcement, just communicating with people saying, hey, look, I don't really want you doing this. And then you have like the true legally backed programs, I think. And that can all be sort of one journey. And so, Vorys, the firm owns Precision E-Control, which is an ancillary business of Vorys that we own completely. And they have a very robust tech platform and go out across marketplaces, across retail sites, understand everybody that's selling, the brand's product, the volumes, the revenues, the disruption, from the advertised price compliance and all of those types of things. So, brands will, or, seller may purchase that, it's not particularly expensive. And then they'll get the information and they'll try to work on it a bit themselves. So that would be sort of like the, what maybe a smaller kind of scrappy brand would want to do, or seller would want to do.
So if you had to leave the audience here with a couple words of wisdom or advice when it comes to dealing with brand protection, IP, that kind of things, what would you say they should take away from this and keep in mind?
So I think that, whether you have a brand or you're out there, selling brands in an authorized way, your success commercially will rest fundamentally on how much control you have. You see, we were both at the same conference a couple of weeks ago. You see a lot of focus on this e-commerce revenue equation. Your revenue is traffic times conversion times price. Each of those variables rests on how much control do you have. If you don't have buy box, you can't run your ad. You can't run your ad, you can't drive traffic. You can't drive traffic, you're not going to convert. Pricing is disrupted, you get into an erosion situation. And so I think that it's still in the very early innings of branded manufacturers and the sellers of those products realizing that you can have all the phenomenal ad strategies and content strategies and whatnot, but if you lack that control, that revenue equation will suffer. And so that's kind of the takeaway that, I think I'd like to leave your audience with, and the fact that a marketplace like an Amazon isn't going to help you with that. They may give you some tools that are useful around the edges, but the guts of your success on that issue will depend on what you do yourself.
Awesome. Well, Daren, if people wanted to reach out to either you or to the firm or whatever, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, couple ways. I'm fairly active on LinkedIn. You can find me there, Daren Garcia, DarenGarcia. Connect with me there. There's a ton of content and things. There's also the group's microsite within the Vorys site. So that would be www.vorys, VORYSE, and then my email is dsgarcia@vorys.com. So those would be probably the best ways there.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming on and sharing today. It's been great.
No, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. It was great seeing you out there. And yeah, I'm sure we'll bump into each other somewhere on the road here in a couple of months.
I'm sure we will. A regular listener of the AM/PM podcast, you notice over the last few months, there's been quite a bit of a discussion about IP protection and what to do to protect your brand with different guests, including today's guest, Daren. It's because I think it's a pretty important topic that a lot of people are overlooking and just not handling the best way they can. And it's becoming more of an issue as the marketplaces continue to grow and to mature and continue spitting off serious cash. So hopefully today you got some good insights and some good things to think about when it comes to protecting your brand. Next week, we'll be back with another amazing guest here on the AM/PM podcast. Remember, new episodes every single Thursday. Hit that share button if you like this episode. Be sure to like it, subscribe to the channel, and check out my newsletter at billiondollarsellers.com, billiondollarsellers.com. Free newsletter every Monday and Thursday. It's like a free $25,000 a year mastermind straight into your inbox. Take care, everybody, and we'll see you again next week.